I have never found a process that is more healing than mediation when it is done well. It is the most healing process I have ever come across. And it's because you work in small groups and because the groups assist each other. Or that's the aim of it when it's done well. And when it is done well, it not just changes your it builds your soul. It is the closest to soul work. Priests can't do this anymore. It is the closest to soul work you'll ever get, because it literally changes not just your own personal worldview, but it allows you the freedom to really be okay with changing everything. And it's not a disaster. It is a good experience when it's done well. And it's often not done well, but even not done well is better than nothing.
You and I met in 2024 when we were honored at the Oxford University for our involvement in mind health.
Yes.
Me from the World Mental Health Forum and you from conflict resolution and being a grande dame in that area for most of your life. And what we found was that not only did we have great conversations about mental health and conflict resolution, but life in general. I immediately was impressed by your generational background and by the deep wisdom that spoke from whenever you did speak.
Thank
but
you.
Also the deep wisdom that spoke from you when you listened. Because that's an art in itself as well, and you do that incredibly well. So we had a great time, and you invited me to participate in your conference this year in terms of mental health.
Mm-hmm.
You also noticed in our conversations that I had written a book many years ago about Snow White. I called it since The True Snow White because I wanted to differentiate it from Disney's Snow White and perk people's curiosity. Why is this the true Snow White?
Yes.
And you specifically wanted me to, which I enjoy, wanted me to include this in my talk and exchange of thoughts with you and the rest of the conference, because you have always been impressed and guided, I guess, by the work of Carl Gustav Jung.
Yes.
Who, as we all know, talks about archetypes and who worked a lot with fairy tales.
Yes, that's right. Yep. In fact, his work on archetypes, what I really loved about the work on archetypes, and particularly that came out also in your story of Snow White, Harold, was the what my brother Constantine calls the wisdom traditions and the marriage of wisdom traditions with psychology. I think we have not paid sufficient attention to the wisdom traditions and the whole concept of oral, oral follow through and sharing of wisdom.
Archetypal wasn't a word then. Carl Gustav Jung wasn't in the world then. But what they said was that how fascinating it is that certain stories with certain figures, which today we would call archetypes, with certain character arcs and lines of progression, if humans have even been interested in remembering them for that long and passing them on as oral traditions without ever having been written down, there must be something intrinsic in these stories that are resemblant of the language of the human soul. Otherwise, we would not bother about it.
You wouldn't remember them for a start.
Yes. So these tales are really speaking the language, we would say, of the heart, of our emotional being. In any case, they are speaking something that is dear and near to the heart of the human experience. And that's why they keep being beloved, and that's why they keep being told. And that's apart from any subject matter.
Yes.
When we talk about Snow White, of course, it is a very classic setup where an utter victim becomes the new queen.
Yes.
But she doesn't become new queen overnight. She has helpers.
Yes.
Seven chakras.
Yes.
7 colors of the rainbow.
That's right. Yes.
7 tones in music. 777 wherever we look. And for me, it was actually very fascinating and mind-blowing and enjoyable to research what the 7 dwarfs actually mean and what they possibly could do with Snow White other than just singing and dancing and laughing to turn her from a helpless princess whose birthright it is to become queen, but that isn't just given to her. How does a helpless princess turn into a powerful queen without becoming so jaded, so reckless, and so full of guilt like her stepmother, that by the end she is queen? It's really no good anymore, neither for her nor for the people she's supposed to govern. So, for example, how do you wield power, yet do it in a very honest, a very genuine, and a very just way? That's what the whole story is all about. Also, I learned that in the fairy tales, we're not talking about men and women, but symbolically, we're talking about male and female energies.
Yes.
So the heroine usually is female, but really she is the soul of the reader or the watcher. So Snow White is you when you read it.
Yes.
And the prince is not a man who rescues her, but the prince is a new concept, a new idea. Somebody who kisses the female side awake and compliments her, and the two make each other whole. So the prince always has to come, and because he usually comes at the end of the story doesn't mean that he's weak or that he's just there, because every princess needs a prince, but because it usually takes the soul quite some time to finish part of the journey so that she's actually capable of meeting the prince when he comes, so that we are actually capable of meeting and recognizing and embracing and marrying with the new concept or the new idea that enters into our life.
It's a lovely way of putting it. I really like that. A new concept that comes into our lives.
Not everyone immediately gets it on that deep level that you do. That's why I so much enjoy talking with you, because every time I explain something like that, I can just see how it falls on a lot of background of understanding, of real life understanding. We're not talking about fairy tales. We're talking about a symbolic code of human living.
Yes.
It's so simplified that even little children can understand it, which leads us to the next misconception that these tales are for children. They're not. Maybe that's also part of why the dwarfs are so small and dwarfs, because these concepts are usually very small, if at all, within us and in our everyday life. It's easy to overlook the dwarfs. At the conference in Oxford, I obviously explained what we do at the World Mental Health Forum.
Yes.
And what specifically made me start doing the work that I'm doing. And I thought that in order to bring you up to speed again, I just ask you to watch together with me this 7-minute video which repeats in a nutshell what I have been explaining then. My mother died by suicide when I was 20, and there was nothing. We were still, as a society, we were still in the Stone Age.
Yes.
I was 45 when my older sister died by suicide, basically as a ripple effect of our mother's death. My father had already started drinking, and though he did not die by suicide, he died by suicide in installments, because most of the time when we visited from Germany with our children, after half an hour, he wasn't there anymore. Until one day I told him how unfair that was, because we were traveling with the small children for 8 hours to visit granddad, and then he was only sober for 30 minutes until he was gone. So in a way, we lost him too after we lost our mom. I was then 54 when Lisa, our only daughter among 5 brothers, died by suicide. Basically repeating the life of my mother without ever having met her.
Yes.
And that would be a whole other book about transgenerational trauma.
Yes.
And living out the trauma that's not even yours. She also suffered a lot from migraine headaches and a whole slate of other things. So by the time that she was 18, she wrote in her goodbye letter that her batteries were completely depleted, that she was sorry about it, that it had nothing to do with us, that it's not our fault, that we did the best we could, that she absolutely loved us, and she just cannot go on living. And that was the time when it became clear to me that this keeps knocking on my door. Luckily, always only 10 or 15 years apart, so that I could somehow recover in between. How do you wrap your mind around this? And my answer was, there are so many things to be said about it, but one thing is for sure, it's only step by step. You cannot do it in any other way. At least I couldn't.
Yeah.
There's no medication. There's no therapy. There's no talk therapy. There's no mysticism. There's nothing out there that can help you find a shortcut. You have to go through this proverbial valley of the shadow of death and just see what it does with you. Hoping and knowing, after several times I knew, that there's always light at the end of the tunnel. And every time the journey was different, because obviously having to let go of your mom is a different experience from letting go of your older sister or of your daughter. And then another 4 years later, my youngest brother followed after having been on medication for more than 20 years. And basically as the longest ripple effect after losing his mom when he was barely 16. I was 20 at the time, so I had a slight advantage. And so after Lisa's death, we took about 2 years to regain our bearings and to define what we wanted to do with the rest of our lives. I said, okay, this is a new chapter. There's a life before Lisa's death, and there's a life afterwards. And nothing has ever been the same since. We've had annual meetings in the south of Austria where we live. Very beautiful place. It looks like the Lake District. We've been invited to Vienna, to the mayor's palace. Well, we were in Paris. We were invited to go to Monaco. Last year, we were in London. We immediately understood that this is not just a private affair anymore. First of all, I cannot continue trying to make a career in filmmaking when I have this. And maybe with all the talents that I have, it just means I need to take all of them, the singing and the dancing and the writing and the speaking. I need to take all of them and put them into this venture.
Yeah.
Somebody out there above us all will know what they're doing. I don't know what they're doing. I have often said that I'm not living my life. Life is living me. And I find that the less I resist and the less I try to get my own way and the less of an ego I have to the point where it's totally gone, hopefully, the more of a tool I become for something that wants to happen. And so it's also been, to me, it's also been not by chance that you and I have met. The part that you and Collaboration Global has played in last year's event.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're just going from one circle in the spiral to the next, ever higher up. One thing is for sure, none of us knows the answer to why every 40 seconds, one of our brothers or sisters decides to leave this planet by suicide. They are going through tremendous pain and being misunderstood. And once they're gone, it's their family and friends that are going through tremendous pain and being misunderstood because somehow, in many ways, they are blamed for one of their loved ones having left.
Yeah.
And they have to continue living with the stigma that one in their family, in my case, 4 in my family, in my lifetime, have left. I hope that when watching this video, they find that I'm very normal. I've just had a very unusual life.
Mm-hmm.
And statistically, I'm probably the only person that is on this planet and that you will ever meet that in their lifetime has had these multiple experiences. And our work is to say, look, if it is part of the human experience, we need to talk about it and deal with it in a very normal way.
Harold, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for doing this. It's so sad that you had to experience what you did, but you are not letting it go to waste.
The thing that comes to my mind, Harold, when I hear that, the concept that you talked about Lisa taking on generational traumas that weren't even her own and the pain that caused. I've been listening to an awful lot of podcasts lately that say that souls often volunteer to come to this planet to assist the planet to shake up, and because they say the planet is alive and the planet needs help. So souls volunteer to come here to assist the planet to shake off the negative stuff that's happened to the planet, like the wars and the all the trauma that has happened through human experience on the planet. And it takes an incredibly brave soul to accept the mission to come, and to not just a brave soul, a very strong soul to come and shake off the generational traumas and to let themselves be the vessel by which those traumas are dissipated and taken away, transformed in some way. And it just made me think Lisa must have been an exceptionally strong soul to have taken that on and to have even recognized that, because most people don't recognize it. It isn't easy to go through that level of suffering and to still maintain some coherence and come out of it. And sometimes we may not be ready for what we think that we can volunteer for, but we do our best, and we always have to follow what our soul needs. And we don't know what our soul needs. We have to go through the experience to understand what our soul needs. And we're not in a position to make judgments at any time, because we don't know whether we would be doing exactly the same thing if we were faced with those exact same emotional components. So,
yes, Lisa was incredibly strong, very focused. She always knew what she wanted from the moment that she left the womb. And it would have never dawned in our wildest dreams that she would not live very long and, on first sight, give up living and not continue, because of how strong she was, how courageous she was, how clear she was, how genuine she was. And everyone who knew her said that she must have been an extremely old soul.
yes.
Which we can only agree to, my wife and I. What she took on and what she lived through was an important ingredient of how she influenced the world while she was yet alive.
Yep, that's exactly
But
what
her greatest achievement was that she, at the same time, I mean, she could have just been too hard to accept and too hard to love and too hard to understand, but that wasn't the case at all. Her greatest achievement, I think, was that while she went through all of her own variabilities in life, she managed a process in which my wife and I completely understood and thoroughly and absolutely loved her. Not in a shady way or a foggy way of saying, yes, all parents love their children, but it was in a profound way of respecting and carrying her wherever we could as an individual. So that when she left, it was impossible for us to return to normal life or just to private grieving. When Lisa left, it was the only natural step for us to say, okay, and we are going to take this learning and tell the world about it. Partly in an effort to honor and respect her and preserve her memory for us, but also taking that experience that we have had with Lisa and widen it and generalize it and spread it as much as we could so that everyone can understand it as a, let's say, entry point into their own investigation of life, of why am I here? What am I doing? Am I doing what I really want to be doing? If not, why not? And how can I tremendously upgrade my life by not necessarily waiting to be saved by someone else, but saving myself from the darkness that surrounds me, which comes back to the Snow White theme and what the dwarves actually teach Snow White is that you cannot afford for the prince to come and kiss you, awaken into happiness. He will, but he will only find you when you are ready. So if you become a light, you can be found.
Yes.
Once the soul is ready, a new idea, a new concept of living can find you. And then you can marry and live happily ever after. But as long as you're still clear in your own world, chances are that you cannot be saved. Even if 100 princes pass by, you will not recognize them and they will not recognize you.
Yes. Yes.
So in a way, Lisa has been the door opener, and a very courageous one, for my wife and I to now do this work and continue doing it, which in essence is the underlying motivation why we're doing this. After the conference in Oxford, you either said or you posted something to the effect that despite all of your years in working in conflict resolution, you had never realized how deeply it is connected with mental health, and how deeply mental health is connected with conflict resolution.
Yes. Yep.
And a couple of weeks later, we spoke, and I had to sort of chuckle inside, not because of thinking, how could you have overlooked that, but just celebrating that moment of your realization and giving extra explanation to what I realized myself, that without constant conflict resolution, there can be no balanced mental health. And we talked about this idea that I shared with you, that ever since the moment of being conceived, I think we are in constant conflict. And I think it's different from the energy sphere that we had been in before. I often say to people that in my book of life, we are not in a life and death experience. We're in a birth and death experience within life. We are part of the field of life, and we never leave that field of life. In other words, earth life happens within that sphere of overall life. And in that overall life, it seems impossible to me that there is as much conflict as there is on this planet. And I don't even dispute that it's a good experience to be in this much conflict as we are on this planet, because we are learning an awful lot from diverging energies and ideas and getting our ways or not. And there's a lot of learning in that. And also, it's a very good thing that life doesn't carry on for quite a long time. In other words, it's a very good idea for Earth life to be limited, because no soul, even if it's eternal and invincible, can stand that much stress for such a long time. From the first moment that we are part of this Earth-based system, we are in total conflict, like all the time. And that's why it's so important, as we've discussed before, to maybe the most important human quality even is to dissolve dispute.
Yes, that's right.
Not only to avoid it, I think avoiding it is actually not as good as resolving it.
That's right. Yep.
Because that means that I can take somebody else's motives just as seriously as mine.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm a good politician, as we know, you cannot go into negotiations saying you want to have your way, but you also need to have a parcel of things that you're willing to offer or give up so that the other side has a chance to go away from this resolution feeling like a winner too.
Mm-hmm.
If we can do that, I think we'll be fine for the rest of our lives.
Harold, I remember saying to you in one of the last conversations that we had that of all the work that I have done as a psychologist, and psychology is a fundamentally wonderful profession, it really is. But of all the work that I have done as a psychologist and as a lawyer and as a guardian ad litem working for the New South Wales Justice Department, etc., that I have honestly found mediation to be the most transformative and the most effective of all of them, because it actually addresses the issues that you've just discussed. And it gives people an opportunity to really understand their own assumptions, their own expectations. It gives people an opportunity to understand not just their own story and where they're coming from, which they can write a book about, but to put themselves in the shoes of the other person and to understand it from their perspective, and then to try to come up with some kind of middle ground that will fit the other person and fit them. And that's really moving forward. That is soul work. And I said at the time that it's the closest to soul work you'll ever get, and it truly is. I have not come across any other process that is as effective as mediation in the transformative sense. And if it's done right, I mean, you really do make very significant changes in people's lives. And it's not the mediator that does it. It's the opportunity. It's the actual mechanism itself. It's the opportunity for people to get together and do what they've always done from time immemorial, but that we don't do enough of now. There are volunteers that come to the planet to assist at various times, and that they become their catalysts for what else has to happen to make the world wake up, really. And that our whole aim is to wake up and to recognize that we each of us have got, and I do believe this, I think we each of us have got a divine spark within us, and we're here to share that gift. And we can only share that gift when we live as authentic a life as we possibly can.
I think it's not a far jump to say, because this soul work doesn't happen anymore, the world is in the heartbreaking condition that it is in today. Because It's not enough to just allow humans to come into existence and then leave them entirely to themselves. Of course, they need to make their own experiences, but they also need a little bit of guidance along the way. And I'm saying a little bit, not a lot. Not like a teacher tries to have you act like a parrot and repeating everything that you're told, but like a mentor who will point you in a direction, and when you turn around, the mentor is gone. to return at another point when you need some guidance again.
Yeah.
But in between, long stretches of in between, you're completely left to your self-learning, which is the whole point in my book of life for human existence to have been granted. It is for us to be a self-learning entity.
Yeah.
In that way, when you look back on your life, you can truly say, this is my life.
Yeah. There are times, Harold, that I find myself saying, I have to be 10 people at once just to get through what I need to get through. And then I think to myself and I think, my goodness, I think God said exactly the same thing. But instead of having 10 people, he made billions of us. And he came, or she came, it came to experience through every one of us what love can be like, what frustration can be like, what passion can be like, what emotions can be like. And all of it, I think, in the end, and I'm quite convinced of this, and my kids laugh at me and say, oh, Ma, you're just a 1950s baby and you're just, stuck in the 50s with your, romanticism. But I do honestly believe that it is about love, and it is about the different types of love. Love is a very hard concept. It's not an easy concept. Sometimes you have to almost look like you're cruel to really love properly. And sometimes you have to just be, almost like a doormat to really love properly. And every situation is just so unique, and every expression of every person is so unique. And you really just have to authentically be there to make it happen properly. And that's what God is experiencing through us. And you can't, if God is all knowing and God is, knows everything, why in the world would he need to, or she need to be here? The difference is the experience, and that's what dispute resolution is about. It's not the information. It's not just about knowing the knowledge. It's going through the experience that makes the difference. But I don't think it's our job to know the how. I think it's our job to be focused on the what and be focused on the fact that there is love, and we need to actually trust that the universe does have our backs, and we can actually make our lives very manageable, and we can manage our lives. We don't need to be fearful.
Thank you so much for saying this, for taking your time to join me in this exchange. Thank you for inviting me, for taking seriously what we do. Not everybody does. And I think we'll both be curious to see what happens in the next several years and how we progress, not only individually, but as human beings, as a collective human race on planet Earth.
I think we're in for a wonderful period of time. We're going to go through a lot of birthing pains, and I'm quite convinced of that. They're going to be very hard birthing pains, but I honestly do think we're going to come out with a beautiful baby at the other end.